Hi guys, this is Jim Dodd. I'm going to take a look at overlapping action, which is one of the most important principles of animation that there is. It's so powerful, gives you that really lovely little flowing movements. It links all of your pose-to-pose animation together. You can use it for cloth and capes and hair and all sorts of other little realistic details of secondary action as well. So I want to get right in and get started. There's basically two methods of doing overlapping action. One of them is through offsetting the keyframes, which is easier for an example such as the pendulum, but far more powerful but more difficult to get the hang of is actually by posing the chain to give you the result you want. That's much more flexible and useful for character rigs or for just a simple, you've got post-pose animation on a character, he's getting up and about doing what he wants, you need to just have a little bit of overlap on one element of the body. You can put that in there. You don't want to get into offsetting keys so much as well because it makes the timeline a little bit more messy to look at. But let's have a look at both of those methods. I'll jump right in. Here's the pendulum swing. I've just put some simple keys on here. Let's just take a little look at the result that we've got. Okay, and this is what most people end up with to begin with. So you basically, this was created by selecting all three joints in the chain, and then you just swing them all like this from side to side. Hey, I've got my pendulum swing, this is awesome. And you set keys at the top, and you get set keys at the other side, 10 frames apart, and bingo, you're getting somewhere. But when you study it and you compare it to sort of the reference we were looking at before, you find that whilst it swings at the one end is fine, it comes to a midpoint. The midpoint is completely straight. And we've already decided we want to have a little bit of drag on the end here, and for this top one to be leading slightly. And when you come to the other end, and the same thing on the other side. Also, I've got no dampening here yet. So let's just get in there and just do a bit of the dampening. So to begin with, you might actually have a little look here. So something more realistic would be starting with a more intense arc to begin with, and it would get up to a point here. Then it would, on the way down here, this side, it wouldn't go as far as it did on the other side. We can straighten out that tangent if we like. And then on its way back up again, it's probably going to do even less. Put that, tangent back where it was, perhaps. And then finally finishing here, this is where you get to use your flat tangent key, flat tangents, for the ending there. And then we might also want to adjust the timing of these afterwards. I've got all three selected, so all curves are exactly the same and on top of each other. I want to move them all together to adjust the timing. I can shave a couple of frames off that, a couple of frames off this, maybe even more off there. It doesn't look quite right, but let's see what it's looking like when it's playing. That's the main thing. Yeah. Okay, so it was going a bit slow as it came in through here. So that's here. Okay, for the distance that it stops there, I'm going to take a couple more keys off. So that's just marquee selecting all the keys from there on, and moving it in that kind of direction. Okay, so that's giving us a basic dampening effect, basically each little pendulum arc. I probably should have one or two extra swings, but I'm just keeping it simple for the sake of this demo. Right, okay, so let's assume you can always muck around with the timing a bit more later, but that gives you a ballpark of the process for the timing. So it's all about finding what's right for you. What's the dampening amount here, and what's the right timing for it, that which we can play with in a little more detail, probably something more like that. But that's an overview of how to get your basics happening. But then in terms of the drag, what we want to have a look at is the different methods of getting a drag. So we're currently going through this point where, hello, wow, those all in online anymore. Oh, that's because I raised them here above 0. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to just put them, for the sake of argument, at a 0 value somewhere along the curve, so you get this intermediate point here. And if I want to make that a bit more realistic, I can just drag that over here instead so that it starts more quickly. Now, doing it via timing offset. Okay, so that would be a case of where you can say the last two joints in the chain. I select both of these function curves together. They're right on top of each other, so you can't see there's a difference. And then I can actually delay that by, let's say, 4 frames. So that was due to start on frame 3. So let's delay that to frame 7. 6, 7. There you go. And then we're getting, when we go through the midpoint here, we're getting a little bit of a delayed effect on these two together. Now that was offsetting both of these bottom two joints by 4 frames. Now let's actually offset the bottom one, the very end of the chain, by a further 4 frames. So that'll be taking that to keyframe 11 as its starting point. Then we get something like this. Now this is basically what we're after. The end's a little bit funky there. I probably should play with the timing a bit more. It's a bit slow. But what that gives us is pretty much what we want. Now if we select all of these, now we actually see what we've got here. We've got something very natural and sort of physics-based, because this kind of exercise is really where it's just a chain swinging in the breeze. This here now, if we want to make a timing adjustments, it's a little bit more tricky because the curves are out of line with each other. We normally want, it's ideal when you do pose-to-pose animation, or generally with animation, in order to be able to make it more flexible to edit, to keep the keys aligned vertically. So whilst this gave us a great result straight away without very much effort at all, now when it comes to editing, this is a little bit more problematic, because I have to, these are the keys that I want to adjust in time. Oh, whoops, I've already missed a couple there in the selection because it's a little bit harder to see where you're going. And then here, these ones are almost on top of each other. So if I want to delay those, speed those ones up a little bit more, I might do it like this. Now they are actually overlapping each other. And whilst the end result is probably still looking quite nice, it does make, it gets the more fluid approach. But that's making it very tricky to manage here. And this is just one simple example with 3 controllers. So that's the advantage and disadvantages of that method. Let me just save a copy of that so I can upload that for you guys. And then let's just save another version as method 2. Okay, let's call this, I'll change the names of these afterwards, to posing. So to do the posing method, right back where we were. Okay, all keys in a line, all key controllers selected. This is right back where we were. Now what we want to do is try and do it by posing. So we go to the midpoint. Okay, here. Now what we do is actually just think of visually the look that we're after. We're after a bit of drag here. We're probably after, I'm selecting control here, a little bit more leading on this one, and the middle one we can have somewhere in between. So that's visually the result that I want to go through. So this is more applicable to things like human characters. So it's a good method. So here it's still swinging through a dead straight point here. So let's exaggerate that a little bit more. So maybe we get to sort of frame 15 here, and we just delay that one a little bit there, and delay this one a little further here. And then we'll actually have this overlap kicking in across the join here, so that one's delayed. This one might be shooting on ahead here, and this one's somewhere in between. So I'm going to select all these controllers. I'm going to key on that frame. I'm going to key on the other frames that I've engineered and the beginning one. I'm actually going to then delete this key in between this other extreme, because I'm actually just sort of posing the result that I'm looking for. I can go and clean some things up afterwards. So Okay, it's clunky, but it's in terms of the key poses. I step through the key poses. We've got there, there, there. Okay, they're close to each other. They're probably should make those a little bit different. Now, if you want to select the controllers in here, it's show NURBS curves and rendering. We can. Where's the shading? Shading. Smooth wireframe. No. Smooth shading. Okay. Let's make that more extreme. And this one up here, still reaching it. This one, the first one's reached its maximum point. This one's about to, and this one's trailing behind. So then when we select them all, we're trying to maintain our keys. So our keys are more vertically aligned in the time slider here. And then, oops, undo that one. Keyframe there. I'm going to delete this one here. So when you get more familiar with animation, you get used to brutalizing your keyframes and deleting them, moving them around. And here on the way back, we want the same thing where, okay, that one's delayed a lot, this one's delayed just a little bit, and this one's perhaps ahead of the game here. Okay, now we start to see that we're building up the same kind of effect. Okay, obviously I needed to do some timing changes. The way I've done this here, there's obviously a lot of time I've added in here. It doesn't need to take anywhere near that amount of time. I'm not doing this scientifically, I'm doing this just visually, really. Just what sort of feels about right. Okay, so that's giving me a bit more of the feel that I'm after as well. Now, this will take a bit longer to come up with the right result. I mean, that's in the ballpark of what I'm after. You might want the timing. You might want to look at the timing of each curve in particular. Say, just starting from the base here. Do I have the base right? We can look back at the graph editor here, because really, essentially, it should be a bunch. Let's select them all. It should be a bunch of offset keys together. I haven't gone all the way through the animation, but you can see here. This is the same kind of feel that we had in the previous one, except the keys are all in alignment with each other. So what you probably have is, so when's that one? The first one's reaching its peak here. The next one is reaching its peak there. This one, is this the third one in the chain? Oh, let's get to that frame. No, that's the second one. Excuse me. This one's the very end one in the chain. So this is the one that should reach its peak last. So if we're going to be more technically accurate, what we should do is have something like this. It's a danger to get playing in the graph editor too much, drawing yourself nice curves, because it's really all about what it looks like in the window and in the viewport. But you might say that it would start to represent the same thing. This one comes up and peaks first, then the second controller's curve comes up and does its peak, and then finally the third one comes up and does its peak. That gives you a little bit of an idea of what's happening in the graph editor there. But the main thing here is, now if I want to do timing changes to this one, I have keys on every frame lined up in the timeline for each controller. So this is much more flexible when you're doing a character. So where does that leave us? So obviously in the other example, I'd shifted them all for the whole of the animation, which was great. Did it all in one go, so I got all my offsets happening at the same time. This one I'm doing them manually, pose by pose. But what have I done? I've done 1.5 swings. So I could technically, when I'm coming back to this next point here, where they're all in alignment, I could go, okay, well I've got my curves here. From that one, I've got all my 3 controls selected. That's from frame 10 to frame 43. And then middle click and drag. So middle click, select in the time slider. So left click, select the original frame. Middle click, select the new frame, and then save key, and it will save the new position. Then I can go to the next one here and go, okay, that's frame 15. Want that one to go to frame 48. Bang, there we go. So then that sets the overall position. I then have to go and adjust and set the dampening of the individual keys here. Use this selection method in Maya. What happens if I spline? It does give me a better result. Often you have to press this key to convert to spline tangents in order to change the tangent type. It's automatic tangenting, isn't that great in Maya, but that's something for a bit later on, or you can manually adjust them like this. Okay, so then you would have to go through the whole of the animation to continue the dampening and to continue posing, or you just go through and you just keep posing it rather than copying and pasting here. You just do everything as if there already wasn't a graph editor. You come in here and you go, okay, this is the pose I want here, but it's more dampened than previously, so I'm going to just back off on all of these, and that's how I gradually shape my animation. Okay, so that's really all I wanted to say about this one at the moment. You don't need to see me repeat this again and again, but this is a much more flexible method here in order to edit your animation more applicable to other characters. That's why it has its advantages, and all the keys line up. So if you want to just change things either in the timeline or the graph editor, bulk select a load of keys, and we know with confidence we've got the whole poses in chunks. Okay, thanks very much for watching. Hopefully that's very helpful.